An old cowboy dressed to kill with cowboy shirt, hat, jeans, spurs and chaps went to a bar and ordered a drink. As he sat there sipping his whiskey, a young lady sat down next to him. After she ordered her drink, she turned to the cowboy and asked him, "Are you a real cowboy?" To which he replied, "Well, I have spent my whole life on the ranch. Herding cows, breaking horses, mending fences, I guess I am." After a short while, he asked her what she was. She replied, "I've never been on a ranch, so I'm not a cowboy, but I am a lesbian. I spend my whole day thinking about women. As soon as I get up in the morning, I think of women. When I eat, shower, watch TV, everything seems to make me think of women." A short while later, she left and the cowboy ordered another drink. A couple sat down next to him and asked, "Are you a real cowboy?" To which he replied, "I always thought I was, but I just found out that I'm a lesbian." One day, a young Indian boy walks up to the chief. He asks, "How did my oldest brother get his name?" "Well, son," the chief replies, "when he was born, we opened the teepee. We immediately saw a beautiful herd of buffalo passing our camp. Hence the name Raging Buffalo." The boy nods and then says, "What about my other brother? How did he get his name?" The chief answers, "It is a similar story, young brave. When he was born, we opened the teepee and looked into the sky. We saw a glorious eagle passing over us, so he was named Soaring Eagle." The boy just nods and kicks the dirt. The chief looks down at him and says, "Why do you ask? Two dogs humping." A cowboy rode into town and stopped at a saloon for a drink. Unfortunately, the locals always had a habit of picking on strangers, which he was. When he finished his drink, he found his horse had been stolen. He went back into the bar, handily flipped his gun into the air, caught it above his head without even looking, and fired a shot into the ceiling. "Which one of you sidewinders stole my horse?" he yelled with surprising forcefulness. No one answered. "All right, I'm gonna have another beer, and if my horse ain't back outside by the time I finish, I'm gonna do what I done in Texas, and I don't like to have to do what I done in Texas." Some of the locals shifted restlessly. The man, true to his word, had another beer, walked outside, and his horse has been returned to the post. He saddled up and started to ride out of town. The bartender wandered out of the bar and asked, "Say, partner, before you go, what happened in Texas?" The cowboy turned back and said, "I had to walk home." A saddened cowboy walks into a bar. The bartender asks, "Why the long face?" The cowboy replies, "I just found out my wife is sleeping with another man. I've decided I'm going to drink myself to death." The bartender looks shocked and says, "I'm sorry I cannot help you kill yourself." The cowboy asks, "Well, what would you do in my situation?" The bartender puffs himself up a bit and says, "If I found out a guy was sleeping with my wife, I didn't sit around feeling sorry for myself. I'd kill the guy." The cowboy jumps up from his stool and shouts, "That's a great idea! Thanks!" and runs out of the bar. A couple hours goes by, and the bartender is starting to get nervous when the cowboy walks back into the bar with a big smile on his face. "Did you kill the guy?" the bartender asks nervously. "Nope. I slept with your wife. Whiskey, please?" The Lone Ranger and Tonto are riding across the desert. The Lone Ranger gets off his horse for a piss by a cactus. Suddenly, a rattlesnake lunges out and bites him right on the dick. Tonto hears him scream and comes running over. He's lying there on his back, moaning in pain. Tonto says, "I'll ride back to that native village we passed a while ago. Maybe the medicine man knows what to do." He jumps on his horse and is gone in a cloud of dust. At the village, the medicine man tells him that for snake bites, you have to suck the poison out. So Tonto jumps back on his horse and rides back to the spot where his buddy is lying there with an injured dick. "What the medicine man say?" the Lone Ranger asks. "He says you're going to die." Lone Ranger and Silver are riding through the desert. Suddenly, they are surrounded by Indians. The Indians captured the Lone Ranger and told him he was to be executed at dawn. "But," the Ranger says, "I have always been a friend to the Indian." The Indians acknowledged that, but protocol, you know, so execution it was to be. "Fine," said the Ranger, "but could I at least say goodbye to my horse?" Lone Ranger goes to Silver, strokes his nose and pulls his head close to whisper in his ear. When he lets go, Silver runs off into the desert. Later, as the sun is setting and the Ranger has been tied to the obligatory post, Silver returns pulling a wagon full of saloon girls along with barrels of whiskey. even a piano and piano player. The Indians have a raucous party, dancing with the women, drinking the whiskey, and singing until the sun comes up. As the sun breaks the horizon, the chief goes to the ranger and says, "Great party, Ranger. You indeed are a true friend and brave man to do that on your last night, but unfortunately we still have to kill you." The ranger says, "Fine, but can I talk to the horse one more time?" The ranger walks over to Silver, jerks his ear down and says, "Posse, you idiot. I said go back to town and bring back the posse." Two cowboys come upon an Indian lying on his stomach with his ear to the ground. One of the cowboys stops and says to the other, "You see that Indian?" "Yeah," says the other cowboy. "Look," says the first one. "He is listening to the ground. He can hear things for miles in any direction." Just then the Indian looks up. "Covered wagon," he says, "about 2 miles away. Have 2 horses, 1 brown, 1 white. Man, woman, child, household effects and wagon." "Incredible," says the cowboy to his friend. "This Indian knows how far away they are, how many horses, what color they are, who is in the wagon, and what is in the wagon. Amazing!" The Indian looks up and says, "Ran over me about a half hour ago." The Lone Ranger and Tonto were surrounded by hostile Native Americans. Our heroes were out of arrows, out of bullets, and out of luck. As the Native Americans inched closer, the Lone Ranger turned to his lifelong friend Tonto and said, "Well, Tonto, old friend, it's been an honor, but I think this is how we die." Tonto turned to his old friend and said, "What do you mean we, white man?" A cowboy walks into a bar in Texas and orders 3 beers. He sits at the bar, drinking a sip out of each glass in turn. This goes on for a few weeks till the bartender says, "You know beer goes flat after pouring. Why don't you just buy them one at a time?" The cowboy replies, "Well, you see, I have 2 brothers. One is in Arizona, the other is in Colorado. When they left our home, we promised that we'd drink this way to remember the days when we drank together. So I'm drinking 1 beer for each of my brothers and 1 for myself." The bartender admits that this is a nice custom and leaves it there. The cowboy becomes a regular in the bar and always drinks the same way. One day he comes in and only orders 2 beers. All the regulars take notice and fall silent. When he comes back to the bar for the second round, the bartender says, "I don't want to intrude on your grief, but I wanted to offer my condolences on your loss." The cowboy looks quite puzzled for a moment. Then a light dawns in his eyes and he laughs. "Oh no, everybody's just fine," he explains. "It's just that my wife made me quit drinking, but it hasn't affected my brothers though." The devout cowboy lost his favorite Bible while he was mending fences out on the range. 3 weeks later, a donkey walked up to him carrying the Bible in its mouth. The cowboy could not believe his eyes. He took the precious book out of the donkey's mouth, raised his eyes heavenward, and exclaimed, "It is a miracle." "Not really," said the donkey. "Your name is written inside the cover."